Imagine, if you will, a reality that feels like it's just unfolding at fast-forward speed.
Yeah, it really does feel like that lately.
Right, like you look to your left, and human mathematical geniuses are acting like scavengers, picking through the alien logic of artificial intelligence just to find new ways to understand the universe.
Which is wild to think about.
It is, and then you look to your right, and people are casually trading away the privacy of their living rooms, letting robots map their homes and film their every move, just to avoid doing household chores.
I mean, who likes vacuuming? Right.
Fair point, fair point. But then, right at the exact moment humanity seems to be crossing the finish line of creating synthetic superintelligence, the White House steps up to the podium and drops an absolute bombshell.
Oh yeah, the big one.
Yeah, the announcement that we might not actually be the only advanced minds in the universe.
It is the ultimate reality check. I mean, just as we become the creators of a new cognitive era, we're forced to realize we might still be the subjects of a much larger, much older one.
Exactly. It's enough to give you intellectual whiplash. But before we get into the mechanics of all that, I have something I need to say to you, the listener. Today's show is an inspiring celebration of impossible ideas and the minds brave enough to chase them down. Finding passengers bold enough to embark on our good ship's journey is harder than most people think, so drop a very humane thumbs up right now to send a signal flare to drifting knowledge pirates like yourself. We know they're out there. Let's bring them home. We're keeping it lighthearted, as usual, but we promise to never skimp on the intelligence. Now, let's kick off this voyage with today's new revelations.
And we have a phenomenal roadmap for this voyage today. We're analyzing a dispatch from Dr. Alex Wissner-Gross, specifically his May 29th, 2026 update published in the Innermost Loop.
Yes, and this isn't just a list of tech news.
No, not at all. It is a profound snapshot of humanity navigating the singularity.
Exactly. So our mission today is to connect the dots across software architecture, infrastructure capital, the messy realities of physical engineering, and a massive geopolitical anomaly. We really need to understand how these disparate fields are colliding right now. So let's jump straight into the machine itself.
Intelligence that is now iterating on its own architecture.
Right. The foundational piece here is Anthropic's launch of Opus 4.8. Dr. Wissner-Gross characterizes this, almost ironically, I think, as a modest but tangible improvement.
Yeah, calling it modest is...
A joke.
Basically, yeah. When you look at the actual metrics, modest feels like a completely deliberate understatement. We're looking at state-of-the-art scores across the most punishing benchmarks currently in existence.
Right, lay them out for us.
So we have 69.2% on SWE-Bench Pro, 57.9% on humanity's last exam using external tools, and a score of 1890 on GDP Valet.
Okay, let's actually break those down because these aren't your typical, multiple choice tests. Let's start with SWE-Bench Pro at nearly 70%. For anyone, that's just staggering. And then we have humanity's last exam, scoring 57.9%. I know the premise of this exam is to compile questions so multidisciplinary and abstract that human experts fail them. But what does a question on that exam actually look like mechanically?
Well, it tests the synthesis of entirely disparate domains. A typical question might ask the model to predict the thermal degradation of a hypothetical polymer.
Yeah, but that's always a catch.
Always. The structural constraints of that polymer are hidden inside an untranslated 14th century linguistic cipher.
You're kidding.
I wish I was. And the final answer must be optimized for a specific quantum computing architecture. It requires the AI to use its external tools to translate the cipher, run chemical simulations, and execute quantum logic gates simultaneously.
That is insane.
Right. Scoring 58% on a test designed to be the terminal boundary of human knowledge aggregation. I mean, it proves the model isn't just recalling data. It is generating novel connective tissue between fields that humans have historically kept totally siloed.
Which brings us to the third metric, GDP Valet, where it scored 1890. Now, this one doesn't get as much mainstream press.
It doesn't, but it's crucial. GDP Valet stands for Gross Domestic Product Valuation via Autonomous Agents. It's a macroscopic econometric benchmark.
Okay, so macroeconomics.
Yeah. You give the AI a massive data set of global economic indicators, supply chain logistics, and real-time geopolitical events, and task it with predicting the GDP impact of specific policy shifts over a 10-year horizon.
So it's basically simulating the whole global economy.
Exactly. It requires simulating the behavioral economics of billions of agents. An 1890 score places its predictive accuracy well beyond traditional human econometric modeling.
Okay, let's unpack this because there's a piece of the Anthropic update that I really want to push back on. The dispatch talks about how Anthropic has paired these massive performance gains with what they call fresh honesty gains. They claim their misalignment rates rival the unreleased Mythos preview.
Or the alignment issue.
Yeah, and the quote that stands out to me is, when the safest model is also the strongest, alignment stops being a tax and starts being a moat. Now, wait a minute. Isn't an alignment moat just an incredibly elegant, corporate-friendly way of describing regulatory capture? Like, if Anthropic proves their safe model is the strongest, won't they just turn around and lobby the government to outlaw anyone experimenting with unaligned open source models?
What's fascinating here is that that is the incredibly cynical and, frankly, highly plausible geopolitical interpretation.
Right.
If you build a moat, you naturally want the government to fill it with alligators so no one else can cross. But if we look at it purely from a technical architecture standpoint, there is a fundamental breakthrough happening here.
How so?
Well, historically, the alignment tax was a real engineering constraint. To make a model safe, you had to forcefully fine-tune it to refuse certain prompts, which essentially lobotomized its creative problem-solving capabilities.
You put a governor on the engine.
Exactly. You clamp down on its vector space. But what Anthropic is suggesting with Opus 4.8 is that they haven't just clamped down on bad outputs. They have fundamentally integrated safety into the model's core reasoning logic.
Oh, so it's thinking safely from the ground up.
Right. The safety protocols actually enhance the model's ability to logically evaluate its own outputs before generating them. It's not a filter applied at the end anymore. It's a structural integrity check built right into the foundation.
And because that foundation is so structurally sound, they're basically taking the leash completely off. I mean, look at what they're doing with Claude Code. The dispatch mentions dynamic workflows spinning up swarms of parallel subagents to carry code-based scale migrations across hundreds of thousands of lines from kickoff to merge, with the existing test suite as the only gate.
This is literally the death of the human middle manager in software development.
But mechanically, how is this actually working? Because when I hear swarms of parallel subagents, I immediately think of chaos.
It does sound chaotic.
Right. If you have a million autonomous agents all trying to rewrite a giant code base at the exact same time, how do they not just constantly overwrite each other's work and crash the whole system?
Well, it requires a massive evolution in version control. Think about how human developers use a system like Git.
Sure.
You branch off the main code, make your changes, and then request a merge. If someone else changed the same lines of code, you get a merge conflict, and a human has to manually untangle it.
Which is a huge pain.
It is. But what Claude Code does is utilize vector representations of the code's semantic intent.
Meaning the system understands what the code is actually trying to do, not just the characters on the screen.
Precisely. The master orchestrator agent understands the entire topology of the software. It spins up a million subagents, but it isolates them into non-colliding execution paths.
So they stay out of each other's way.
Exactly. Subagent A is rewriting the database queries, while subagent B is updating the front-end UI components. They operate in parallel, simulating millions of branching timelines instantly. If a conflict arises in the simulation, the models resolve it based on semantic priority before a single line of actual code is committed.
Wow. And the only human element left is just defining the test suite.
Yes. The test suite is the final safety inspection. If the code compiles, passes all security checks, and meets the performance parameters defined in the test suite, the swarm just merges the code into reality. The bottleneck in technology is no longer how fast humans can type or how well they can coordinate. It's simply how accurately humans can define what they want.
Which perfectly transitions us into the reality of what happens when that intelligence vastly exceeds human comprehension. Because we are seeing a complete reversal of the traditional dynamic. Humans are no longer the teachers. We are the scavengers.
We really are.
And the report from mathematician Tim Gowers is the perfect illustration of this.
Yeah, Tim Gowers, a Fields Medalist, one of the most brilliant mathematical minds alive, is reporting that a major problem in additive combinatorics has been solved by humans.
Okay, good for us.
But, and this is the key, they achieved this by lifting methods from an AI solution to an entirely different problem, the unit distance conjecture.
So let's dive into the mechanics of this, because I refuse to just wave my hands and say, oh, the math is too hard. What exactly is happening here? First, what is the unit distance conjecture, and how did the AI approach it differently than a human would?
So the unit distance conjecture, broadly speaking, asks how many pairs of points in a given set can be exactly a distance of one apart.
Sounds simple enough.
It sounds simple, But in highly complex mathematical spaces, it becomes incredibly difficult to prove. Human geometry relies on axioms, visualizable logic, and sequential deduction. We draw lines, we create formulas based on things we can actually conceptualize in our minds.
But the AI doesn't have a visual cortex. It doesn't quote-unquote see a graph.
Exactly. The AI approaches the problem by mapping the mathematical constraints into a high-dimensional, continuous, latent space. It turns the discrete logic of geometry into an optimization problem involving multidimensional tensors.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around that.
It basically found a solution by taking a path through a 10,000-dimensional mathematical space that a human brain literally cannot visualize. It built a novel algebraic bridge.
Okay, so the AI solves the unit distance conjecture using this alien multidimensional tensor logic. How do Gowers and his team use that to solve the sum product conjecture over the reals?
This is where the term scavenging comes in, and it's brilliant. The AI's proof was essentially a black box of alien logic. Gowers and his team had to study the AI's tensor mappings and reverse engineer them.
Like digging through a crashed UFO.
Very much like that. They had to translate the machine's high-dimensional optimization techniques back into human-readable, discrete, logical proofs. Once they translated the core mechanism of the AI's thought process, they realized this brand-new method of reasoning could be applied to a completely different problem, the sum product conjecture, which deals with how sets of numbers grow when you add or multiply them together.
But wait, I really have to challenge this framing. Is the human really just a scavenger here? Because translating multidimensional tensor optimization back into discrete human logic sounds like an act of profound, original genius to me.
It's definitely genius, but...
And the AI might have found the path, but the human built the map so the rest of us could actually read it. Doesn't that preserve human agency?
It preserves human agency in the role of the interpreter, not the pioneer. Imagine a primitive tribe finding a discarded smartphone. The person who figures out how to use the screen as a mirror or extract the battery for fire starting is displaying immense ingenuity. But they didn't invent the semiconductor. Gowers and his team are displaying breathtaking human genius by translating the AI's logic, but the dispatch uses the phrase quietly outpacing them for a reason. The machine generated the original insight. We are merely figuring out how to harvest the artifacts left behind by a superior intellect.
It is deeply humbling. We are literally mining our own creations for knowledge. But as we know, mining requires heavy machinery, and generating this level of alien logic is mathematically and computationally violent.
Very much so.
It requires an astronomical amount of power, cooling, and advanced silicon, which brings us to the financial reality of 2026. Because bankrolling the silicon is forcing Wall Street into the wildest financial engineering in human history.
We have entirely abandoned the traditional venture capital model. The scale of the Singularity requires infrastructure finance. The dispatch notes Anthropic just raised $65 billion at a $900 billion valuation.
Let's stop and look at the mechanism of that capital. A $900 billion valuation vaults them past OpenAI, who is sitting at, what, $730 billion.
Oh, right.
But that $65 billion isn't just a bunch of Silicon Valley VCs writing checks for equity. Dr. Wissner-Gross specifies that Apollo and Blackstone are shopping a roughly $36 billion debt deal to buy Google TPUs for Anthropic to lease, and it's backstopped by Broadcom. Why debt? Why are massive private equity and alternative asset managers like Apollo and Blackstone structuring this as debt instead of just buying shares?
Because you cannot fund a global infrastructure rollout on equity alone without diluting the founders to zero. Think about how we built the transcontinental railroads or how nations build nuclear power plants. You use debt. But traditionally, software startups couldn't secure massive debt because if the software fails, the bank has nothing to repossess.
Right, you can't foreclose on a failed social media app.
Exactly, but you can repossess a tensor processing unit.
Ah, so that silicon is the collateral.
Yes. Apollo and Blackstone are structuring this like commercial real estate. Compute is the new real estate. They're putting up $36 billion to buy the physical Google TPUs. Anthropic then signs a massive multi-year lease agreement to use those chips. If Anthropic goes bankrupt, Apollo and Blackstone simply repossess the servers and lease them to Mistral or Meta or OpenAI.
That is brilliant. And where does Broadcom fit into this as the backstop?
Broadcom is a titan in custom silicon and networking infrastructure. By backstopping the deal, Broadcom is essentially providing an insurance policy. They are guaranteeing the underlying value of the hardware network. If the market for AI compute suddenly crashes, Broadcom absorbs a defined amount of the loss.
which lowers the risk profile for Apollo and Blackstone.
Exactly, which in turn lowers the interest rate for Anthropic.
Yeah.
It is a masterclass in risk syndication. Financial engineering is literally the prerequisite for software engineering right now.
And the hardware suppliers are making out like bandits. The dispatch shows Dell's AI server revenue is up 757% to $16.1 billion. They're the ones selling the picks and shovels in the gold rush.
Oh, absolutely.
But on the flip side, we see the absolute ruthlessness of this capital consolidation with Grok.
The Grok situation is a perfect study in the raw economics of human talent.
Yeah, so Grok is an AI chip company, and the dispatch says they are raising $650 million for a second act after NVIDIA basically gutted their senior team through a $20 billion licensing deal. Legally, how does this even happen? You can't just buy a company's employees.
No, you can't buy people. But you can structure a licensing deal so lucrative that it effectively functions as an acqui-hire of the brain trust. In this specific high-end AI chip market, the hardware is only as good as the compiler, the software that tells the chip how to run the AI models efficiently. Top-tier compiler engineers are rarer than the chips themselves.
So NVIDIA didn't really want Grok's hardware. They wanted the dozen people on Earth who know how to write the compilers for that specific type of architecture.
Exactly. NVIDIA comes in and says, we will pay you $20 billion to license your technology portfolio. But the unspoken, or perhaps explicitly written caveat of that deal is that NVIDIA also extends massive life-changing signing bonuses to Grok's entire senior engineering leadership to come work for NVIDIA to, quote-unquote, facilitate the integration.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Grok, the corporation, gets an influx of cash, but their human engine is entirely ripped out.
It's like a sports team getting their entire starting lineup drafted by a richer rival overnight. Now, Grok has $650 million to rebuild, but who do they hire? All the experts just left for NVIDIA.
It's a brutal reality.
It really is. And this concentration of power, where a few companies like NVIDIA, Anthropic, and OpenAI hold all the talent and all the compute, is creating massive geopolitical panic. If the costs are this astronomically high, no one wants to be stuck paying rent to an American tech monopoly, and that is driving an aggressive push for sovereign and corporate AI independence.
We are seeing a structural fracturing of the global tech ecosystem based purely on survival instincts. Dr. Wissner-Gross points to Europe first. Mistral is actively chasing superintelligence because the EU realizes they can't afford to rely on U.S. tech giants.
But the EU's response isn't just to fund Mistral. The dispatch notes they are readying emergency powers to override chip contracts during shortages. Let's look at the legal mechanics of that. A government threatening to tear up private contracts between tech companies and chip manufacturers. That is wartime behavior.
It's precisely wartime behavior. We saw echoes of this during the COVID-19 pandemic with the Defense Production Act regarding medical supplies. The EU is preparing a legal framework that classifies advanced compute as a critical sovereign asset, equivalent to energy grids or water supplies.
Okay, so if push comes to shove.
If there is a global shortage of AI chips, and a European hospital system or defense grid needs compute, the EU government will activate these emergency powers. They will legally void a private contract, say, a European data centers agreement, to provide compute to an American social media company and redirect that silicon capacity to the state's chosen priority.
They are literally nationalizing the silicon.
Essentially, yeah.
But it's not just governments freaking out. It's the highest levels of the corporate world, too. The dispatch highlights Kirkland & Ellis, one of the most profitable law firms on the planet, spending $500 million to build their own internal AI tools rather than renting from OpenAI or Anthropic.
Yeah.
$500 million for a law firm to build software.
Because the risk of data leakage is existential for them. When you rent a foundation model, you are sending your prompts via API to a server controlled by a third party.
And Kirkland Ellis is dealing with top-tier corporate litigation, multi-billion-dollar mergers, trade secrets.
Exactly. Even if Anthropic or OpenAI promise not to train on your API data, the architectural risk of a shared tenant environment is too high for a firm like K&E. There are techniques like gradient leakage or sophisticated prompt injection attacks, where a malicious actor, perhaps an opposing counsel's AI, could theoretically query the shared foundation model in a way that extracts the underlying legal strategies K&E have been inputting.
So the model basically memorizes the strategy and accidentally spits it out to a competitor.
Yes. So Kirkland & Ellis realizes that in an era where AI drafts the contracts and plans the litigation, the model is the firm's intellectual property. If you don't control the weights of the neural network, you don't control your business. Owning the model is the new owning the firm. They are spending $500 million on proprietary infrastructure to guarantee absolute cryptographic isolation of their legal logic.
And speaking of controlling the infrastructure, Meta is finally charging for AI features, starting at $7.99 a month. The era of free, subsidized AI is over. But the consumer shift that completely fundamentally rewrites how we interact with machines is Apple's iOS 27.
Oh, the intent-based operating system. This is the death knell for the app economy.
Okay, break down the architecture of this for me. For 15 years, the smartphone has been a siloed grid. You want to buy a stock, you open Robinhood. You want a flight, you open Delta. You tap the glass, the app opens, you navigate the UI. The dispatch says iOS 27 introduces a top middle swipe that summons a do-it-for-me Siri. How does this mechanically bypass the apps?
Under the old paradigm, apps were walled gardens. The user had to learn the specific user interface of every single app. What Apple has done with iOS 27 is insert an advanced LLM directly into the OS orchestration layer.
Right into the foundation of the phone.
Yeah. So when you swipe down and say, book me a flight to Chicago tomorrow, get a hotel near the river, and tell my wife my itinerary, you are expressing natural language intent.
And then the OS just takes over.
The OS translates your intent into temporary machine-to-machine scripts. It doesn't open the Delta app UI on your screen. Instead, the OS uses background API tokens to ping the airline's backend database directly, negotiate the ticket purchase, ping the Marriott API for the hotel, and ping the Messages API to text your wife. It executes the entire complex multi-step workflow invisibly in the background. The graphical user interfaces of all those billion-dollar app companies are suddenly completely bypassed. They're reduced to invisible plumbing.
I mean, that's just mind-blowing. But if autonomous code is executing all of our financial, travel, and personal logic in the background, the security of that underlying plumbing has to be absolutely flawless.
It has to be.
Which explains the next data point in the dispatch. IBM and Red Hat pledging $5 billion and 20,000 engineers to Project Lightwell, an AI clearinghouse to secure the open-source supply chain.
This is a desperate defensive maneuver. Modern software is heavily reliant on open-source libraries, bits of code maintained by volunteers that handle things like data formatting or image rendering.
Right, the classic joke that the entire modern internet is held up by a project maintained by some random guy in Nebraska.
It's funny because it's true. But in a world of autonomous AI swarms, it's terrifying. If an AI adversary discovers a zero-day vulnerability in one of those obscure open-source libraries, they can exploit it in milliseconds, cascading through the global API economy before humans even realize it's happening.
That's a nightmare scenario.
Yeah, so IBM and Red Hat are deploying 20,000 engineers to forcefully audit, secure, and monitor the foundational building blocks of the internet so that our new autonomous agents don't build our future on quicksand.
And IBM is basically fighting a two-front war because the dispatch also notes they are betting $10 million on delivering a large-scale quantum computer by 2029. But while they are building the hardware, ETH Zurich just solved the software side of quantum security by achieving perfect randomness amplification from quantum physics. The dispatch calls this the one commodity no balance sheet can fake. We really need to go deep on this. Why is randomness so valuable, and why can't regular computers do it?
Well, traditional computers are deterministic. They follow rules. When a computer needs a random number to generate an encryption key for your bank account, it uses a pseudo-random number generator, a PRNG. It takes a seed value, like the current millisecond on the system clock, and runs it through a complex mathematical algorithm to spit out a number that looks random.
But if an AI gets smart enough and knows the algorithm and can guess the seed...
Exactly. It's not truly random. It's just a pattern too complex for humans to immediately see. But superintelligent AI, or future quantum computers, will easily crack PRNGs. They will predict the pattern and shatter modern cryptography. To survive, we need true entropy. And true entropy only exists at the quantum level.
Like radioactive decay.
Or the unpredictable behavior of a photon passing through a beam splitter. Quantum mechanics dictates that the outcome is fundamentally, universally unpredictable. It isn't a complex pattern. It is pure physical uncertainty.
So what did ETH Zurich actually do? Because we've known about quantum randomness for a long time.
The problem has always been extraction. When you try to measure a delicate quantum state to extract that randomness, the macro world interferes. Thermal noise, vibrations from the building, electronic interference of the sensors, all of this corrupts the pure quantum signal with predictable classical noise.
It dilutes the randomness.
Right. So ETH Zurich developed a cryptographic protocol that mathematically isolates and amplifies the pure quantum entropy, filtering out all the classical noise. They have created a flawless bridge between the unpredictability of quantum physics and macroscopic digital data.
So they can manufacture a string of digital ones and zeros that the universe basically guarantees cannot be predicted by any intelligence, artificial or otherwise.
Yes, in an era where AI can synthesize a perfect video of the president, clone your mother's voice, and forge any document, absolute mathematical unpredictability is the only foundation left for trust. It is the ultimate cryptographic anchor.
The one commodity no balance sheet can fake. But while we are securing our digital souls at the quantum level, the physical world is proving to be a much more chaotic training ground. Software is easy, but atoms are stubborn. Which brings us to the collision of AI and physical reality. We are turning our environments into data.
We have to. We have exhausted the internet's text and image data. To build general-purpose physical robots, the models need to understand gravity, friction, torque, and spatial reasoning. They need physical data.
The dispatch notes Waymo is rolling out the Ojai, a roomier robotaxi co-built with Geely Zeekr for unsupervised public rides. It's out there, learning the chaotic ballet of human traffic. But the example that is truly dystopian to me is a company called Shift. They are offering free home cleaning. The catch, you have to let them film you so their robots can learn the chore.
Yeah.
The phrasing here is just bone-shelling, turning your living room into a training set and your dust into data. Let's look at the data economics of this. Why does Shift need to film my living room? Can't they just build a bunch of fake houses in a warehouse and train the robots there?
They can, and they do. But simulated environments lack the infinite edge cases of reality. A warehouse living room doesn't have a toddler unexpectedly dropping a half-eaten lollipop on a high-pile rug while a golden retriever runs past. In physical robotics, edge cases are mathematically intractable without pure, massive volume of real-world exposure.
Like how a robot vacuum gets totally confused by a dropped sock.
Precisely. To train a model to adapt dynamically to the unstructured chaos of human domestic life, you need petabytes of raw, first-person video data from thousands of diverse homes. Shift realizes that the visual data of your family navigating your living room is infinitely more valuable to their neural network than the hourly wage of a human cleaner. They are subsidizing the human labor specifically to buy the camera feed.
So I have to ask you, the listener, right now, pause and think about this. Would you accept this trade? Would you let a massive corporation install cameras in your private sanctuary, mapping the layout of your home, observing your family's daily habits, if it guaranteed you would never have to vacuum, scrub a toilet, or fold laundry for the rest of your life? Convenience almost always defeats privacy in the long run.
It does. It really does. And this physical iteration isn't just happening in our living rooms. The dispatch highlights DARPA's RAPIDID program aiming for synthetic shelf-stable blood by 2029. We are using AI to engineer the fluid dynamics and cellular biology of the human body.
But the physical universe still pushes back hard against our ambition. We see this with the aerospace update. Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket exploded during a static fire test, and the dispatch notes this likely hands SpaceX the near-term lead for the Artemis program. Dr. Wissner-Gross writes, a reminder that the Singularity still has to clear ignition before it builds the Dyson swarm.
This perfectly illustrates the friction between software iteration and physical physics. In the digital realm, Anthropic's Claude code can spin up 1 million subagents, rewrite an entire architecture, fail, revert the code, and try again 1,000 times in an hour. The cost of failure is just electricity.
But when a rocket fails, things melt.
Yes. You can have the most advanced AI in the world running finite element analysis on the metallurgy of your rocket engine. But in reality, microscopic impurities in the titanium or chaotic fluid dynamics in the liquid oxygen turbopumps can cause a catastrophic anomaly. When New Glenn explodes on the pad, you don't just hit undo. You lose tens of millions of dollars in hardware, and more importantly, you lose months of time rebuilding the test article. The feedback loop of physical engineering is stubbornly, agonizingly slow compared to the speed of software.
Atoms are harder than bits. And as we force this hyper-fast intelligence into the slow, messy physical world, the human beings caught in the middle are starting to buckle. We are seeing intense exploitation, labor friction, and absolute absurdity in how humans respond to these systems.
The labor market is the immediate casualty here. The dispatch bluntly reports that Wix, the website building platform, has cut 20% of its staff directly due to AI's fast evolution.
I mean, if the AI can instantly generate the front-end UI, the back-end database, and the deployment pipelines from a simple prompt, you simply don't need an army of human developers maintaining the platform. But labor isn't just taking this lying down. The dispatch notes an incredible counter-movement. A co-founder of Occupy Wall Street has shipped an app to seize the means of computation.
It is a profound structural evolution of labor organizing.
Let's break down the mechanics of this, remaining entirely objective about the politics. How does one seize the means of computation?
Well, during the Industrial Revolution, power belonged to those who owned the factories. During the early Internet era, power belonged to those who owned the network platforms. In 2026, the ultimate capital asset is compute, the raw processing power of the GPUs and TPUs. This app is designed to pool the idle computing power of millions of individual users' smartphones and laptops, creating a massive, distributed, decentralized supercomputer.
Wow, okay.
It's an attempt to break the monopoly of the massive server farms controlled by the tech giants, giving grassroots organizations the computational muscle to train their own models or run their own autonomous agents without paying rent to the billionaires.
It's distributed grid computing as a labor strike. Fascinating. But while humans are trying to pool their power, the systems built by the tech giants are finding new, incredibly invasive ways to monitor us. The dispatch notes that U.S. troops are being targeted via commercial location data. Adversaries are using AI to sift through the oceans of metadata generated by weather apps and fitness trackers to map military movements.
Low weaponization of the mundane data exhaust we all leave behind.
But the surveillance gets exponentially more granular and terrifying than GPS coordinates. Researchers have revealed an AI-based SSD side-channel attack. The dispatch says it fingerprints the sites and apps you have open just by timing disk contention, proving that even your idle hard drive now has a tell. We need to explain the actual mechanics of this because it sounds like science fiction. What is disk contention, and how does a side-channel attack work without breaking encryption?
Okay, so traditional hacking attempts to break the encryption of your data or install malware to take screenshots of your desktop. A side-channel attack ignores the data itself and measures the physical or operational byproduct of the computer processing that data. In this case, the solid-state drive.
The flash memory where all my files are stored.
Exactly. When you browse the web, your browser constantly writes tiny temporary cache files to the SSD so sites load faster next time. Different websites have entirely different structural footprints. A heavy streaming site like Netflix writes data in a completely different pattern than a text-heavy site like Wikipedia or a highly encrypted banking portal.
Okay, but how does an attacker read that if my hard drive is encrypted?
They don't read the files. They measure the time. The SSD controller has a limited bandwidth, and it uses complex wear-leveling algorithms to decide exactly which microscopic flash memory cell gets written to. If you have Netflix open in one tab and a secure internal corporate document open in another, they are constantly fighting for access to the SSD controller. That fight is disk contention.
So the malware just sits there with a stopwatch.
Precisely. A seemingly harmless background process, maybe a script running on a totally unrelated website you have open, just measures the microsecond delays and how long it takes to read its own dummy files. The AI model is trained on these microscopic delay patterns. It knows that a 4-microsecond stutter followed by a 12-microsecond burst perfectly matches the unique caching fingerprint of your specific bank's portal.
That is deeply unsettling.
Without ever decrypting your data, the AI deduces exactly what tabs you're looking at just by listening to the microscopic timing of how your hard drive handles traffic jams. Your machine is betraying your deepest privacy just by the physical way it breathes.
It makes you want to smash your laptop with a hammer. But the friction goes both ways. The human response to these omnipresent AI metrics is leading to absolutely absurd corporate behavior, which brings us to the Amazon AI leaderboard. This is, without a doubt, the most hilariously human anecdote in the entire dispatch.
This raises an important question about Goodhart's law in the era of billion-dollar compute. It really is a spectacular demonstration.
The dispatch notes that Amazon killed an internal AI leaderboard after staff gamed it with costly busywork. So let's look at the mechanics of this exploitation. Amazon management rolls out new AI tools to their engineers and wants to encourage adoption. So they create a leaderboard ranking employees by how often they use the AI.
The intention is innocent, right? Boost productivity by gamifying the adoption of new technology. But Goodhart's law states that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. If you tell an engineer their performance review, and potentially their bonus, is tied to their position on an API usage leaderboard, they will stop optimizing for their actual job and start optimizing for the API calls.
So how did they game it? They didn't just ask the AI to write more code, did they?
No, that would require actual thought. Engineers wrote automated scripts that ran in the background, firing off infinitely nested loops of massive, complex, entirely useless queries to the AI. They generated synthetic data, asked the AI to analyze it, format it, and re-summarize it over and over, thousands of times a minute.
Just to pump their numbers up on the HR dashboard.
Exactly. But here is the critical difference between 2026 and historical examples of gaming the system. In the past, if an employee gamed a metric, they wasted some paper or maybe some of their own time. But in this era, running complex AI inference requires massive amounts of advanced compute. It requires those incredibly expensive Google TPUs we discussed earlier.
The same compute Apollo and Blackstone are engineering $36 billion of debt to acquire.
Yes, the employees at Amazon were literally burning through tens of thousands of dollars of electrical power and finite computational bandwidth, tying up the most expensive hardware on Earth just to generate fake telemetry to appease a middle management spreadsheet. Human self-interest was physically draining the server farms. Amazon had to pull the plug on the entire program because the gamification was destroying their actual infrastructure capacity.
It is almost poetic. So let's take a breath and look at the totality of what we have discussed. We have Anthropic's AI completely rewriting its own architecture in swarms. Human mathematical geniuses are deciphering high-dimensional tensor logic scavenged from machines. Wall Street is engineering sovereign-level debt to buy silicon collateral. Europe is preparing wartime legal formworks to nationalize chips. Apple's OS is bypassing the entire app economy via invisible APIs. Robots are vacuuming up our living room data. And Amazon engineers are burning supercomputers to game HR metrics.
It paints a picture of a civilization running at absolute maximum capacity, violently compressing its own evolution, completely focused inward on the synthetic minds we are manufacturing.
You would think that consumes 100% of our global bandwidth. You would think nothing could possibly be more important. But Dr. Wissner-Gross saved the absolute biggest paradigm shift for the very end of his May 29th dispatch. We have arrived at the cosmic twist. Minds that were never ours.
The philosophical irony of the timing is just staggering.
The dispatch states, "We spent the year manufacturing minds, and now the government says at least some were never ours." The President of the United States has announced that the White House is releasing a lot of information having to do with extraterrestrial things, and it is trending #1 globally.
For almost a century, the search for non-human intelligence has been relegated to fringe science or science fiction. But now, the disclosure is coming directly from the executive branch of the United States government. And the quotes provided in the dispatch from high-level intelligence officials leave absolutely no room for ambiguity or misinterpretation.
Let's look at the quote from the former National Security Council Aviation Security Director. This is a person who had access to the most highly classified sensor data on Earth. He insists, regarding these crafts, that they are nothing that we can build or have built or are using out there.
Mechanically, that statement is a paradigm-shattering admission. He is not saying we don't know what they are. He's affirmatively stating what they are not. By saying they are nothing we can build, he is confirming that the flight dynamics, the propulsion systems, the material science of these objects completely defy our current understanding of terrestrial physics. They are not secret DARPA black projects. They are not highly advanced Chinese or Russian hypersonic drones. The NSC director is stating, on the record, that they are the product of a non-human intelligence.
And the government is officially leaning into the taxonomy of it. The dispatch mentions the launch of Aliens.gov, a literal official .gov domain dedicated to organizing this disclosure. But here's where it gets really interesting, because the narrative fractures into absolute surrealism. Alongside this official paradigm-shifting disclosure, the dispatch notes a specific video clip teased by officials. A clip of a flying saucer ferrying a migrant over the border wall.
The juxtaposition is almost impossible for the human brain to process.
And to be completely clear to you, the listener, we are looking at this detail purely as the bizarre anomaly it is reported to be in Dr. Wissner-Gross's text. We are not touching the terrestrial politics of border walls or immigration policy. What is staggering is the scale difference. Let's analyze the visual described here. You have the border wall, this deeply human, physically imposing, highly politicized barrier meant to enforce imaginary lines drawn on a map by terrestrial governments. It represents the absolute limits of human territorial squabbling. And casually interacting with it is a flying saucer, an object representing a cosmic intelligence, an entity that possesses physics-defying technology capable of crossing the interstellar medium or dimensional barriers. And it's casually ferrying a human being over a steel fence.
It is the ultimate collision of the cosmic sublime and the terrestrial mundane. We are so fiercely obsessed with our own borders, our corporate leaderboards, our TPU server farms. We think we are the masters of reality because we taught an AI how to code. And suddenly, an intelligence from the outside simply floats over our barricades, rendering our entire civilizational paradigm incredibly small, petty, and localized.
Dr. Wissner-Gross ends his update with a profound sentence. The unexamined solar system is not worth scaling. We are pushing so frantically to optimize our AI, to secure our supply chains, to build out the infrastructure for a Dyson swarm, but we haven't even looked up to see who is already sharing the sky with us.
It leaves us with a staggering thought to consider as we step back from this entire May 2026 timeline. We started this deep dive looking at human genius. We talked about Tim Gowers and his team acting as scavengers, reverse engineering the multi-dimensional tensor logic of Anthropic's AI to learn a new way of doing math.
Right. Scavenging from the synthetic minds we built in our own image.
But if these crafts, these extraterrestrial objects the White House is disclosing, are truly nothing we can build, then they are operating on an understanding of physics, mathematics, and logic that is thousands, perhaps millions of years ahead of our current models. If we are already humbled today, scavenging brilliant math from our own terrestrial artificial intelligence, what on earth will we scavenge in the technology that built those extraterrestrial crafts? As we fiercely compete to become the gods of our digital realm, we are simultaneously waking up to the reality that we might just be ants in the physical universe, studying the bootprints of giants.
It is a reality check of cosmic proportions. We are building alien minds in our server farms while literal alien minds are flying over our heads. We are at the very beginning of understanding what intelligence actually is. The outro music is by Rainbow, our resident 6 android girl band from near future Valet, Cambodia. They are the undisputed baddest band in the universe, and today's song is called Lost Signal. All finished songs are performed live using the Abacus platform by the band's creator, Human Performance in the Age of AI, reclaiming your humanity from the algorithm. Be sure to share the playlist with someone who has the mental bandwidth to absorb these provocative ideas. Links are in the description below. Enjoy the music. Thanks for tuning in.
The signal pulls, the signal breaks. Catch it, hold it, coming through the dirt, coming through the mud. The cold wind, the old way. It beats your cheek, the promise, fossil rings, the shadowy. The eyes keeping up, the space beyond story, what's impossible.